Hey guys, it's the IronTrap podcast. We are here again every week doing a podcast. This has now become Mike and my like Friday ritual. It's kind of nice. I try and bust ass to get all my work done for the week in the shop and videos so that Friday I can screw off, sweep the floor, and then we do a podcast. That's the goal. It doesn't always work, but today it did kind of work.
Yeah, it was a nice, very calm day in general.
For you, maybe. I still had to...
Well, I shipped like 20 packages, but
So
it's
that's
just a calm.
calm compared to normal.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
We're not all running around like maniacs.
Yeah, so, so again, we have to say it over and over again. So if you're new to the podcast, we do weekly podcasts. Every other one, we alternate. We also put it on a video format on YouTube. So if you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple, whatever your method is, if you hop on YouTube, this week is a audio only. We every other week do a video version where we bounce between us talking and we have a topic where there's some visual stimulation. So there's cool stuff.
I like the visual stimulation.
Yeah,
That's good.
I'm on a roll today.
Yeah.
So any news, new business stuff going on that we should talk about?
I'm trying to think. Well, that Model A pickup's still for sale. If you're interested, send us an email. I'll put some photos. Or it's listed on our website, I should say. So if you're interested, head to the website. It's there, all the information. If you have any questions, just send us an email.
We are motivated sellers.
Yes, we need the space.
If I didn't mention it already, I kind of helped a friend out buying it. I did not want to buy it. We will get rid of it for it's already priced. What's it priced at?
$4,500.
$4,500 is very affordable for what you're getting.
The bed alone is like a $1,500-ish bed. So,
so
just remember that.
We're very motivated, and that is because we have, we mentioned it, Minnesota, and after our last podcast, I usually once a week call leads and different things. Spoke with a gentleman in Illinois that we're probably going to go visit. He has one or two project cars, and he's telling me prices that are tempting that we may have to come home since we're already there. So we may have another project car.
2 to 3 more vehicles.
Yeah, that are lined up. So in the interest of moving stuff along, people that complain, I don't know where the guys are on Facebook, they're always complaining the hobby's too expensive, they're priced out of the thing. We're giving like a Model A pickup that's a really good hot rod start for very affordable.
Yes.
So, so make us an offer. Like I mentioned, if you got a really good sign or something that takes up less space that is worth similar money.
We do not want your other Model A project.
But if you follow us normally, we are very against trading because we have so much crap. I usually say no. But in this instance, I would, to move it along, if you had something interesting to trade, I would consider it a piece of really rare speed equipment or an engine or something I could use that takes up less space. That is the key, less space.
Much smaller.
Otherwise, we're planning our spring traveling and all of that stuff. Charlotte, Carlisle, all that stuff is kind of coming up. So
way quicker than we realize.
The cold days are going away quickly, and I still feel like I have a lot to do on the Mercury. But I'm going to try and kick butt and get that on the road this spring. Model A swap meet is in April. That's the Sunday at Carlisle. So if you are anywhere near us, I've mentioned a bunch of times, it is a really cool one-day event that the Model A Club puts on. Has a really good swap meet for the size of show, and we're going to go and...
That's in Trexlertown, PA.
Trexlertown, PA, so outside of Lehigh Valley. It's worth the trip. If you can make it in a day, I'm not saying fly from California, but if you're local, it's definitely worth going to, and it's a good one. No baby toys, no cell phone case vendors. It's just old car parts and car people, early Ford nerds.
Yep.
So,
and I just emptied the trailer of all that parts we bought locally. If you have a shoebox, there's a lot of shoebox stuff that's going to be going up. I just photographed a bunch of stuff this week, shoebox related. So
it's going to be shoebox week on the website and eBay. You got the if you watch our YouTube channel, under the videos, Mike got the shopping tab to communicate with our website. So now you can actually click through or see our merch, and eventually we're going to start integrating
some parts.
So what'll be really cool about that is if we're doing a picking video and maybe there's some items that are in that video that we know people will be interested in. We'll put them right underneath of the video, and you could click through it, and
it takes you right to our website.
So it's another. We're trying to make it easier. We're trying to get with the times.
And that the way that also works is now on Google. Whenever you Google stuff, there's those little windows at the top.
Oh yeah.
Of for eBay and different websites, our stuff now shows up in those little windows at the top as well now.
Oh, perfect.
So yeah,
and
just getting more eyes on our product is the big thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I've been kind of lazy. I do the email blasts. So if you,
oh yeah, we haven't done that in a little while.
I've been pretty lazy with it. I generally we try and I was trying to do an email that we would send out weekly. So if you go on our website, a little pop-up comes up. You can join our email list. And I am trying to do the opposite of Harbor Freight. And sorry, Eastwood. Even though I love Eastwood.
It's basically like 90% of most companies.
Yeah, big businesses
an email daily or
more. We've always been not that way. So once a week, and it's actually not really selling. We usually put like events we're going to. We put our like latest 3 to 5 videos that have come out on there, so it's all in one place. So the reason we were doing that is we get a lot of people that watch on streaming services on TV, and sometimes it doesn't show you our newest video,
especially if you don't have a YouTube account.
Yes.
It'll just recommend whatever.
Yeah, so by clicking on that email, it'll show you the most recent videos. You can click through and watch it either through the email, or you can click through our site or go to YouTube. And then also we do sprinkle in some of the new parts that got listed, but it's very, and then there's of course our like merch at the bottom, but it's very light on the selling once a week. So if you're interested, you can go on the site and you can subscribe. I'm going to try and get better at doing that. It was one of those things I was doing like Thursday nights before bed. I would quick put an email together, but it's
been a busy winter.
Yeah, been busy and worn out after working on the Mercury every day.
Yeah, and also it's just Matt and I that handle 90% of the online stuff.
Yeah.
So there's not a giant team of us with all these people that handle different things.
People think so.
It's just Matt and I.
And then Steve just he walks around and bumps his head a lot.
Yes, he doesn't do any technical online stuff. He's just an in-person guy.
He's just working in the shop.
Yep.
So today's topic, after all that's out of the way, we were doing. We're going to call it top 5 skills or traits that you need to build a classic car or nostalgic hot rod or custom. We're kind of doing the classic car thing because this also applies if you're restoring or you're doing any type of old car. These types of things are helpful. We get a lot of people. This topic came to mind for me coming up with this was in person. We get a lot of people that will come up to us. We get emails that they would love to build an old car, but they get intimidated because like myself or some of the other bigger YouTube channels have a lot of bigger, more industrial tools. Guys have power hammers and pull maxes and CNC plasma cutters, and a lot of times people think that you need to have that stuff or they're overwhelmed. And we're going to break it down on the basic stuff you need. I think all of us are here at IronTrap are pretty much like came from, it's not like we went to a restoration school or went to an automotive, technical school. We all kind of just learned from these basic traits. Yeah. So, I guess that's it. We'll get into it.
Yeah, that's basically
that was an awkward transition. I guess that's it.
So number 1.
So number 1, and this is something that I am actually very good at. A lot of people aren't as good at it, and it's something that if you start thinking this way, it helps you in a lot of aspects of life. So problem solving. So you need to be good. I don't care if you're restoring a car back to 100% original, you're building a street rod, you're building a muscle car, a race car. You need to be able to problem solve. Problem solving, I say, to me is the number one thing, because with problem solving, you're able to do almost anything. If you can problem solve or troubleshoot, you could pretty much figure anything out. Now, the quality that you figure it out to or complete the job is all on your skill level and your level of OCD, I guess. But with you, like problem solving, I mean, for your work background,
that's all I did was problem solve. It was the machine's broken, figure out why it's broken, fix it, and let's get back to work. So, I mean...
And there was a time crunch always.
Oh, insane. That's one thing I love about working here. The problem-solving time crunch doesn't really exist. Unless it's with the website. Like, we have to figure out why the website doesn't work.
Or a YouTube video didn't upload.
Yeah.
Like, oh, crap.
Those are very minor. I'm not getting threatened of being fired or anything. But it's just... when you have good problem-solving, it transfers to, like, everything you could possibly do, even outside of cars.
Yeah.
It just... If you have the ability to sit down and think logically also is a big thing.
Yep.
Because I've seen people that troubleshoot that are... the logical part's gone, and they're just like, we need to just rip the machine out and totally start over. I'm like, well, that's a possibility, but we can't just burn the car to the ground and build a new one. We have to logically problem solve on how we can fix this problem we're having now.
And the one big thing I trying to, if you guys haven't noticed in the videos, I've been trying to push a little bit with Steve to get him filming more. We've been getting a lot of people that have commented they'd like to see Steve on camera more, and maybe just talking through some of the stuff he does a little more. So I've been trying to get him to do some more fabrication stuff that's probably at the limit of his experience. And he's got a lot of he has the ability to do it. It just doesn't come as naturally to him as maybe myself. But I always tell him, when he's trying to problem solve or trying to figure out something that he's doing, and I'm trying to help him along with it, it's like, what are the things that you can't change, or you can't, bend on a little bit, like what he's doing right now, like juice brake conversion on the Green Roadster, and it's like, the brake pedal is here, it has to be here, because we're using stock pedals, and the master cylinder only fits in this little window of an area in the cross member. These are the two areas. How do we make the two of them work together? And it's like, everything else in between, we're open for interpretation if it ends up being safe and structurally sound. So that's the way I think through a lot of stuff. Doing the windows, I just did the rear windows on the Mercury. I'm like, all that really needs to happen is it needs to fit this opening, and it needs to hinge and disappear. It's like everything else, whatever you do and it has to be straight because glass goes in it, know, so relatively straight. So that's the way that's a big part of problem solving with the car stuff. I'm always just, especially with old hot rods and customs, it's like I feel like it's a little harder than restoration.
Oh, definitely, because you're customizing. It's not just bolting a fender on or a hood on. There's a lot of different variables you've changed a lot of stuff.
And Ford, or we should just say Ford, whatever manufacturer car that you're restoring, the engineers back then did the work for you. Yeah. They already designed it all. The bolts are where they're supposed to be. Everything's how it's supposed to be. So, like, if you follow what they did, it's going to work as it should have. But as soon as you start changing all of that, now it's way harder, because you're trying to work, especially with what we do, with doing like nostalgic or factory looking modifications like we're doing with the Roadster, where you're trying to use some factory parts or the Mercury windows and make them multiple different years or body styles of parts work together. So it makes it harder. But
even like I deal with the problem solving on the parts end, because people are always asking questions.
Oh yeah.
And probably the biggest one is like, where do my motor mounts land? Well, if you're using a torque tube rear, the trans has to live where the torque tube ends, and then the engine mounts go where it has to live where it has to live. There's no like weird way around this. You just bolt the trans in, and that's where the motor mounts land.
That's true. Because like I was helping Nick, our buddy Nick, that I mentioned on another podcast. I'm helping him with a little Roadster pickup project, and he came here, and that was what we were doing. And he was like, well, man, what are we going to do about the fan or the this? And I'm like, you need to pick. Again, it's like, what are the things that can't move? So if you want your body to be right here on the frame, it can't move. Like for him, he wanted the wheel well centered up in the bed. Okay. Well, then the cab has to be dictated by where the bed is, which means the firewall lands where it lands. We can't change that. So do you want to use a stock firewall or recessed? Well, I really like to keep an original type firewall. Okay, well, the engine has to live wherever the hell we need a little bit of clearance between the firewall and the back of the engine, and then that's where your motor mounts are. So, and I think people struggle with that, like with engines and stuff. It's like, well, I always say, what's more important to you, the wheel well being centered, or you have to figure out a fan.
Yeah.
Which one of those things. And if you don't think you could figure out the fan, or are you okay with moving the radiator forward an inch to get you fan clearance, but now everything else jives?
Yep.
It's like, so that's...
You kind of have to pick the easiest... What do you feel is the easiest problem for you to solve?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes the fan is actually very easy to figure out. It's just they overcomplicate how all of that has to work together.
And people... We get it with customers a lot when building a car. They say one thing, but they want to do another thing.
Oh,
so they're like, I want it to be like a kid coming out of a young man coming out of World War II would have built his car, but I want to use a T5 transmission and a 9-inch rear. And you're like, well, and then they're like obsessing over it has to be an original 32 bullnose. You're like, why does it matter? You have an aluminum radiator and a modern trans and rear. The kid coming out of World War II didn't have those things. So why are you obsessing over these other little details? As soon as you like bend on something that major, everything else is thrown out the window. It doesn't matter. And so you're making, so then it's like they're creating additional problems. You're like, just run an electric fan.
Yep.
Now it was Nick. Nick had like an aluminum radiator. And I said, if you're obviously not that obsessed with period correct, because you're not going and taking an original radiator, getting a record. And I'm not trying to be negative or being a jerk to him, just like trying to be like realistic. And like,
logical. Yeah.
So you have to, the problem solving, you have to sometimes, it's also having that humility to be like, okay, like what am I actually building here?
Yep.
And what do I want to get out of it? And then that helps your problem solving. But even with restoration and stuff, it's like you have to be able to problem solve, like maybe the car was hacked up or cut up, and like you have to problem solve what would it have looked like, or how do I make this part that isn't reproduced?
Yeah, or problem solve making reproduction panels fit, because a lot of times they don't fit correctly. So you have to problem solve.
All the time.
99% of the time they do not fit right. But you have to problem solve what's the easiest way to make this fit, but still look factory and all jive together, which I would not want to work in a restoration shop where you're using... the modern stamped replacement panels. It has to be a living nightmare.
Oh yeah, 100%. We had a customer on social media, or a viewer, that hit us up, and I think he was doing a Model A. I don't remember what it was, but it was a patch panel for the back of like the body, or maybe it was a Model A pickup, and he like sent me the thing, a DM, and he was like, "This bead is like totally the wrong width and shape. How do I make it fit?" I said, "Throw it in the trash."
Yeah.
He's like, "What do you?" I'm like, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "Make a bead roller die like I did, or a Pull Max die, or go to someone that has a Pull Max, and they will make you the part. If you're that concerned about the bead being correct,
or get out the cutoff grinder and welder, and you're gonna section some shit to make it look right."
So then, talking it through him, I wasn't just like cut and dry, and didn't answer him, but like, then it's like, oh, well, maybe I could make like a bead roller die or a hammer form. And it's like, these are all the things you need to do. If your OCD level is high enough that's a problem, then you need to make the tooling to make that patch. And unfortunately, most people have to make that mistake of buying the crappy patch panels once or twice to realize that
it's not even crappy patch panels. Like, all patch panels are basically like that. And
I get it. If you're buying a quarter panel for a 67 Camaro, that's kind of a hard part to even make from scratch. But like these Model A patch panels
they're like 12 inches long with a straight bead in them.
And they're done with a bead roller that's literally a step die that you could get in a Harbor Freight bead roller. Like, stop buying those panels. There's a reason they're $25. They don't fit. They're not even.
There's an 18-year-old kid making them that does not give a shit if they're 100% correct.
Yeah. They don't even have the dies to do it correctly.
Yeah.
But so you have to problem solve through that stuff, and even problem solving. How do I come up with the money?
Yeah.
It all is it like, or how do I get these parts, or like the stuff we're into. We talk about in podcasts a lot, like trading up and buying this to get that. Like, I problem solve a lot. Like, you buy. We talked about before. You buy a whole engine to get the intake that you want. You know, and you're just like, how can I get this? This part's unobtainable. Well, I need to do this to get that, to get what I want. And you're just working through it. So I think it's a most important trait to get it done. Once you open your mind to being able to work through anything, usually it's, you know.
And problem solving, a thing I could chime in with problem solving, sometimes is having a second set of eyes look at it and talk through it together can really benefit with problem solving, because some stuff you just get stuck on. And I mean, I do it with Matt. Like, hey, can you just come look at this? What do I need to do? And just sometimes a second set of eyes just looking at it, and they'll be like, oh, this is what you need to do this. And you're like, oh, okay, well, glad I've been staring at that for 6 hours. I could have just asked you.
Yeah, that happens with Steve a lot. He'll be like struggling with something. I walk over, I'm like, dude, why didn't you just ask me? You did all this. He's, I know, I didn't want to bother him. I'm like, yeah, but like, I look at it in like 3 seconds. I'm like, oh, I'll just make this little piece and I'll weld it in, and then it's like simple.
And you get stuck on something, you get frustrated, and then you're not thinking logically. I used to do it at Blommer at the chocolate factory all the time. Dudes would be working on an issue for like hours, and then you just walk over and you're like, did you look at this over there? And they're like, no. Like, well,
crap.
You probably gotta look at that, because that might be the issue. And then they come back, they're like, that was it. It's like, I'm just thinking in series. You get flustered and carried away, and then you're looking at the complete wrong area.
And I guess that with the car stuff, that's something I've gotten better. I've tried to get better at doing is, if you're having an off day or you're having trouble, you don't need to problem solve it right that second, especially if you're
walking away always helps.
Yeah. If you're a hobbyist, especially, like if you're not doing customer work, you can just walk away, go home, go in for the night.
Yeah.
And that works for me a lot. Like I just go in and I think through it, and then I come out in the morning, and Steve laughs at me.
Sometimes that night.
Yeah, sometimes that night. Steve laughs at me. I do it a lot. Like this morning I did it because I finished the other quarter window for the Mercury. I go in for the night, and I come out, and the first thing I do is I walk right up to that thing, and I look at it with like fresh eyes, as if I didn't spend 3 days building it. Yeah. And if something stands out to me when I walk right up on it, it's the same as a person at a show or an event walking right up to it. And if it doesn't look right, when I first look up on it, then I know it's not right. So like I do that sometimes. It's like I walk, if I'm like struggling with a panel not looking right or something, I'll walk back in the next day and I'm like, yeah, that's not right. That's not going to work or whatever. And you start over or whatever.
You were doing that with the Sweetheart Roadster for like 6 months.
Well, there was a lot of stuff with the Sweetheart Roadster that I pushed through, walked out the next day and go, yeah, it's not really that great. But you know what? We got to keep moving on the videos. And then now.
That is detrimental to us.
Yes.
With doing, 3 videos a week, it's a lot. So
it's a bad habit I've gotten into that I've had since Eastwood.
Yeah.
It was very bad at Eastwood that it was pressure that you needed to get something done, or I only had a certain window each day to work on stuff between meetings. And also there's the like bosses being like, well, why isn't this video done? Or why were you, whatever. So I got in this bad, and it wasn't that they were jerks about it. I just got in this bad habit of like learning that you could push through and it looks okay in video.
Yeah.
And it gets the video out. Because especially in the Eastwood stuff, we're trying to sell tools, not necessarily the project I'm doing. So if I get to a good stopping point, that's good for the video, and you DA it and make it look good, and that's it. And I got a really bad habit of us doing that, where I was doing that, and now I'm redoing stuff we're not happy with. So that's why the Mercury I've talked about a few times, super technical videos, because I'm taking the time to make the stuff work and look right instead of pushing through and just getting it like roughed in, you know. So that's it. Walk away, problem solve in the shower or sitting on the couch watching TV or
I couldn't tell you how many times when I worked at the chocolate factory, I would literally go home, lay in bed. Like there'd be issues. It would take like 12 hours to fix because it's just complex. And I'd literally be sitting in bed and go, oh shit, get out of bed, call them on the phone. So you need to, I just literally came to mind, check this out, look at it, and then go to bed. And they'd be like, that fixed it. What were you doing? I'm like, literally just laying in bed about to fall asleep. And it was like a light bulb goes off.
All the other thoughts go out of your head. And then it's very easy to solve that problem. So that's definitely the top one. And if you can train yourself to get better at problem solving and working through things in a rational manner, it helps. The second one is equally as important, and this is, again, we're trying to throw some things that we could have done a deep dive. You need to be able to TIG weld or whatever.
Yeah.
Get really in depth. But some of this stuff's really high level, and we're trying to do this podcast more to like people that are just trying to get into the hobby, or maybe you're want to do more of your own work instead of paying a shop. This is some of the stuff. So mechanical aptitude.
Yes.
So this is the most simple form. You don't have ever restored a car, worked on an early Ford, whatever it is. If you even as a kid were able to build a model car or take something apart or work on your bicycle, you have that.
Yep.
Now if you're the type of person that after 35, 40 years of your life, you still can't remember lefty loosey, righty tighty, it's probably going to be a little difficult for you to build a car, So that's, it's that simple. These cars are very simple, especially the early Fords and all that stuff.
They were pretty simple, even up into the 70s. There wasn't...
Yeah, there's really isn't that much mechanically.
Yeah,
it's just,
well, they were, up until, the 70s, they were purely mechanical. There was very little else going on in them.
Right. Yeah. The most electronics you got is like
the radio,
maybe the heater,
yeah,
and then maybe power windows and stuff.
Yeah.
But they had power windows in the 60s and the 50s. So, but as far as like putting the car together, and building a car yourself or restoring a car, you can, and we've tried to show this in the videos, like you can do as much of the process as you want or want to learn. And it's okay to send a few things out that you don't want to learn, don't have the ability, whatever. So,
and sometimes it's just worth paying a professional to do it, so it's correct. Not that the way you would do isn't correct, but it's the peace of mind that it's probably going to be done correctly,
or to the level that you would like it.
Yeah.
I always say that it's like we've showed it before. We could cover a seat.
Yeah,
but it's probably going to look like
we covered a seat.
We covered a seat, and if it's a nice car, I'm going to send it to a upholstery person because I'm not invested to buy the sewing machine and teach myself how to sew and do all that. So, but if you're looking to get into this stuff or build your first car, especially if it's like an early style Ford or hot rod, like the stuff we focus on, it's very simple. Don't think about it too much. If you can turn wrenches and do an oil change and brakes on your own, daily driver, you could probably build an early Ford. The speed at which you do it is, obviously going to be a learning curve, but you have to be able to enjoy the process of it. So the mechanical side of it, if you're able, it's just nuts and bolts.
Yep, and you have to be able to look at an item and be willing to try and figure out how to take it apart, not just like scared. You're like, it's not, like you said, nuts and bolts. It's got to come apart somehow.
Yep.
You just sit down and try and problem solve.
Yep. It all ties together.
Yeah, and just take it apart.
And I think with the nowadays, it's even easier for someone that's a beginner to get into the early hot rod type stuff because there's some great companies that are out there that have made this. And that's another thing that with social media and YouTube channels, if you're following us or you're following some of the other channels that are out there they have more tools and fabrication skills, you're going to see guys that are making, I'm freaking re-engineering stuff and doing some much higher level stuff, but it doesn't need to be that way. You don't need to re-engineer a brake system so that it looks like factory. You can go to Old Yankee or a similar company. Shout out to those guys.
Yep.
And we've showed it on our videos. Like when I did the Roadster pickup, I went the totally bolt-in type method. And you could buy like an Old Yankee kit that is, yes, it's a little bit of money, but you just need to be able to drill some holes, nuts and bolts, and you can now have juice brakes on a early Ford. You could bolt a flathead V8 in a Model A.
Yep.
And they've done all the hard work of figuring all that out and made it in a fairly simple kit to install. We show the method in our videos that a lot more of the how a guy might have done it back in the day where you have to figure out everything from scratch.
Yep.
I talk about a lot. I do things the hard way sometimes because I do enjoy the problem solving in the fabrication. But if you're scared, just be okay with buying a kit that somebody makes.
Or like you said about TIG welding, you could buy a reproduction fender, or if you're working on a car where you can get replacement parts, if you don't have the skills to do a big patch panel in a fender, no one's going to judge you for buying a reproduction fender, or, you might have to spend a little bit more money to find an original fender that isn't damaged. So sometimes it's the cost of skill versus the part. And some of these early Fords, a decent usable fender is not that expensive.
Yeah, true. And that goes back to the being realistic with yourself of like, is it more important for me to get this car on the road and drive it and enjoy it, or am I more invested in learning new skills and the process of putting the car together myself with no help? Well, then, okay, buy the TIG welder, buy the English wheel, learn how to do it that way. But like the process I've went through, it's taken 15, 20 years to finally be at the point where I feel like I'm comfortable. I can make stuff from scratch and it looks halfway decent. So it may take you a lot longer to do that. And that's where we see people that have cars that are a project car that's taken them 20 years to build because they went that route.
Yeah.
But if you're okay with learning the process, no problem. I mean, that's it. You're more into the process than the driving of the car, or it's not as important. But if you have the mechanical ability to take stuff apart, work on your bicycle, do all of that, it's very simple. You got to remember kids were building these hot rods when they were 16, 15, 13 back in the day, and they were going down the road. And yes, it might not have looked as good.
Some of them were taking them to Bonneville and going pretty goddamn fast.
Yes, that's true. And these guys didn't have hardly any tools, no internet. They just figured it out. Problem solving and mechanical ability. Those two things will get you through building a car and learning or whatever. So the next thing is a little more of a skills-based thing here. So fabrication and welding, you need it.
Definitely. 100%.
You're going to have to...
Even if it's just making little brackets to hold your brake lines, or it may not be something big, but you have to have the ability to, if you can't find the part, make a little bracket or a brace or any of that stuff.
Or like we said, modify an existing part. Sometimes you do buy some of these kits that are made by companies that are good, but maybe in your application you need to modify that kit because there's like the old Yankee kit. It's made for these specific things. Well, you want to run a T5. Okay, well, now that transmounts and some of that stuff's not going to work. You could use 80% of their kit, but you're going to have to fabricate or modify their kit. And that's where you need to have a little bit of fabrication skills. Being able to at least use a MIG welder is, I think, a necessity.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be able to weld. So, number one, if you got mechanical ability, but you don't need to know how to weld, you should probably either take some classes. A lot of community schools have that. If you have, like Eastwood, places like that were doing welding classes, or we talk about a lot. Go find the guy that's like me that has a cool shop or a pretty outfitted shop. Go over there and trade pizza, whatever.
Or some of your mechanical ability.
Trade some time, sweep the floor, whatever it is, for some TIG welding or MIG welding lessons. So when I was learning how to TIG weld, I think I've talked about before, I spent like a year doing all my lunch breaks just myself, just learning. And I got to a point where I kind of plateaued and I couldn't get better TIG welds. I could stick stuff together, but I don't know if it was after that year or during that. And myself and one of the other guys at Eastwood, we went over to the owner of the one's race car shop that's right on High Street. Crap, I've forgotten the name of it. But they've been around forever. But we went in there one time and just asked the owner, hey, could we come and trade you some Eastwood stuff?
Ed Quay?
Oh, yeah, Ed Quay. Okay. So it was the owner of Ed Quay. Not Ed, it was the guy that worked there forever and bought the company. I apologize, forgot his name. But we went in there because we were doing some, trading some products for photo shoots and stuff there. And we basically approached him and said, hey, if there's a night or two that you are staying late, could we throw you a couple bucks or trade you some Eastwood products, and can we come in and get some, some instruction?
Yeah.
So we went in there maybe only one night or 2 nights, and literally just he kind of like corrected some of the stuff we were doing wrong, and then that set me off and running by doing that.
Yeah.
It's like that same idea. Don't be afraid to go ask someone to give you a crash course or give you whatever, and buy them pizza, sweep the floor. In that instance, I work for Eastwood, so we were able to trade some product or something like that for for him giving us some lessons. But whatever it is, maybe your wife is really good at baking pies. Trade just some home-baked pies for some MIG welding lessons.
Yeah.
So if you live locally, your spouse is really good at that. I like pizza.
Yeah. Iced tea.
Iced tea is. I've been eating better and drinking.
Yeah.
And
there's a large chunk of time where I was paying Matt for help on stuff with half-gallon Wawa iced tea.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things on previous projects of mine that were TIG welded that were paid for by Wawa iced tea.
Pizza and iced tea has always been one of my currency for me.
Yes.
So, so if you could learn from someone at least the basics, of course, with like the internet nowadays, you can watch a lot of YouTube videos and actually teach yourself pretty easily, especially MIG welding. But again, if you want to get some hands-on experience, you can go to any local car guy, and they'd be willing to help. Most people are pretty friendly with that and give you a crash course. And, I still do it to this day. I mean, I still have friends that I've taught how to weld. We're giving them crash courses on it. And my nephew has been coming around and learning, and he can MIG weld, and I've given him some crash courses on TIG welding.
Steve's gotten better at MIG welding since he worked here.
He still doesn't want to, he still hasn't taken the interest in like learning TIG welding, but
he had some pretty dog shit welds when he first started. They were
real,
and he will admit that. I'm not talking shit. He would say he was a terrible welder.
Yeah, Steve needs a little bit of, and I haven't really given him a full crash course, but luckily for him, I'm usually standing right there.
Yeah.
He just but Steve's gotten better at like setting the stuff up. I've helped him understand, like with TIG welding, some pieces on the Mercury, how to fit a patch panel.
Yep.
Like there needs to be like little to no gap, fit well, blah, blah, blah. So that's one step in going towards that direction, is how to fit a patch panel.
Yeah.
So he's learning, and you could do that. But yeah, fabrication and welding, basic tools are needed for that stuff. I mean, if you get, a way to cut, as simple as a cutoff grinder and tin snips, you can do a lot with cutting with that. Simple body hammers, and there's a lot of just simple basic tools you can get with not a lot of investment, and you could start fabricating. You can get a secondhand welder pretty affordable, or a scratch and dent Eastwood welder or something like that. Harbor Freight, has crazy discounts on welders that you can get.
Facebook Marketplaces also. You can find some people selling, an older Miller unit that's, got some hours on it, but they're pretty stout. They last a long time.
Yeah.
You don't have to buy the latest and greatest brand new digital everything. You can get away with an older unit to get you started.
Yep. So the next one is more of a basic one, but and it goes hand in hand with the problem solving. Patience.
Yeah.
And I will reference, I've never heard anyone say the patience thing more often. We've talked about it before than Ron.
Yeah.
Ronnie Roadster, Ron San Giovanni. I've heard him say it to me, but like he said it to a lot of other people. Like I've been around him, and there's like at a swap meet or whatever, and he's like, he says that to people, and like it never dawned on me that like that was one of the biggest things that helped me till I started thinking about more over the years of getting better at building cars and putting stuff together was patience. And I still fight with it all the time. If you want to get something together quickly, or you want, and especially in today's day and age where everybody wants everything like now, it's hard. This stuff, you need to have patience, whether it's finding the parts.
Yeah. I was going to say that, like, if you're looking for a car, patience is like the number one virtue, because you're going to end up, if you're not patient, you're going to buy some piece of shit that you hate yourself for 5 years later while you're still trying to restore it.
Yep. Or you end up not having the patience, and you buy something that's kind of like what you want, but not really what you want. And like, you get people a lot like that. Like, oh, I want to build a Model A Roadster. And they're like, that's what I want.
I have a four-door sedan.
Yeah. And then they buy like a Chevy with the coupe with the roof cut off, and they're trying to make it a Roadster, and it's like in the end of the day, when that car is done, it's still not the car that you wanted. So you're never going to be as happy because it's not what you really wanted. So, doing that, but also with the patience of, like we talked about earlier, it's like, you may have to walk away, or you may have to cut that piece of metal back out because it didn't weld in as good as you would like.
Or fitting a panel. Patience when fitting a panel.
Oh my God.
Take just a little bit more time to just make it fit that little bit better. It'll weld in, it'll finish in better. And I mean, the Merc roof is a prime example of patience and just taking your time and making it all fit well. It's just like when you welded the roof section onto the roof, all that patience, it kind of just
clipped in. And and any areas that aren't as nice as I would like, it's areas where my patience wasn't there, and I probably should have metal finished it better, or hammered and dollied it better before we put it on the car. And it's like, I know that, but again, if you're a realist, you go, okay, well, what do I want out of the car? And the car's gonna have body filler, so I'm okay with it.
You reach that point of diminishing return.
And it had been a month. I had been working on the roof for a month. I was kind of like, all right, it just needs to go on. It's never gonna get done if I don't just live with a couple of those things. And the more patient you are with this stuff, it gets easier every project. So
100%.
As I've gotten more patience, when I did the Mercury, a lot of other things that I have done where I wasn't as patient and I got a little better each time. Now doing that one, I'm like, I probably have about the maximum patience I'm going to have at this point.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier because you're plateauing. You get to that next point where okay, well, last one I did, I had to cut it out and redo it, so I know that might be part of the process, and it's not as...
And how many of us have broken shit because we're not patient?
Oh, my God.
Patient. And then you just, it may not be an expensive part, but you could break something that you only have one of, and now you're like, well, we can't go any further until I find that part that I just broke, because we're just dead in the water now.
Yeah, you're trying to... a lot of people, they're trying to, and I do it sometimes, you're trying to, get a lot done, and you're walking really fast, and you're trying to... And you're walking with a tail lens or a headlight, and you're being kind of manic, and you trip and fall, and it breaks on the floor. You're like, stupid. Why? What am I in a rush to get from this corner of the building to that corner of the building? Just slow and steady. And yes, you could be a little quick with some things, but maybe be quick with cleaning up.
Yeah,
you can't really hurt much doing that. But when you're in the thick of it, or and the patience of looking at something, if it's not right, it's not right. So if you're trying to, and I have cars that I drive that there's stuff that's wasn't quite right, and I didn't have the patience, and I just made it work, and sure it works, but now when you go back to work on it, it's a pain in the ass to work on, because I didn't have the patience to take that extra, I didn't take it apart one more time and sand that part a little better or clearance it, and now the damn thing rubs and it's a pain in the butt, or whatever, it's not right. And that just making it as right as you can with your skill level is something that I struggle with and still trying to be patient about.
The patience also ties into the first thing, troubleshooting. If you're not patient while troubleshooting, you can easily overlook what the actual problem is, but you're being, rammy and manic, and you just skip right over that one problem. Trying to troubleshoot an ignition system, and you're not going through it patient and methodically from start to finish, and you're jumping from front to back to left to right, and it's if you just go from front to back on the ignition system, you'll find the problem. But if you jump from this to that to this, you're missing all the possible problems.
Yeah, and that's true, because that's
and we've come into that with a bunch of cars we've been trying to fix. You always you kind of start in the middle and you work one way instead of just starting at the beginning and going to the end.
And using rational thinking, where you're okay, this is new, this is new, this is new. What is the one thing in this ignition system? We reused a crappy old original 32
That doesn't work
switch
all the time, though, because condensers just shit the brand new condensers shit the bed.
There's been times when it's it's the old part, or it's the whatever. Or this just happened, and it's the same exact thing. I know we think it shouldn't be the brand new condenser, but it did the same thing as the last condenser.
Yep.
Why don't we? And unfortunately, with condensers, it's a little hard to test it. But a lot of the stuff, you just you can test it or take it apart and look. But you have to, think rationally about it. But the patience thing, again, even with this stuff, having the patience to wait to find the items. We see that all too often now with some of the younger people that are getting into the nostalgic stuff. They want to build a nostalgic car, and it's like they don't have the patience that, like, you need to start with a Model A. You need to start with a broken in half Model T. And if you don't have the money, you're not going to just get a 32 Roadster, your first project car. Unless you have the money, you're not going to just get into one. You need to build a car and have the patience to build the skills and the, like we talk about, meet people and get in the mix of things that you have the opportunity to buy one for a good deal. But you're not going to just...
I want it, and I want it now.
Yeah, and we see that weight. And I'm going to be completely honest. I've had guys that were pushy because they wanted to get that thing and they didn't want to wait. And a guy knew I had it, and they bugged the shit out of me. So I gave them the FU price, and the dude paid it. And then they bitched at me later on, like, oh, man, I saw one come up on Parts Swapper like 3 months later, and it was like half of what you charged me. And I said, well, dickhead, for 3 months, I told you it wasn't for sale.
Yeah.
And you kept bugging me and telling me that you had to have it. You were going to buy it from me. You watch too much American Picker and tell me that I don't want to sell it price. All right, fuckhead. Here's the I don't want to sell it price. You don't like it? Go away.
Yeah.
And then you paid it because you backed yourself in a corner because you told me that I don't want to sell it price, and you can't beat me at this game, And I told you the price, and it was double retail, and I thought, you know what? I'll find another one for double retail.
Yeah.
And then you paid it, and then you're mad. And I had a guy one time that bought something from me and bitched at me about it. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I told you for ages it wasn't for sale, and that was the price to get it off my shelf. I don't feel bad because I told you it wasn't for sale 37 times. And we get customers that do that with us often, and then they're mad when you tell them the price, and it's the I don't want to sell it price. And they're like, well, that's ridiculous. I told you it wasn't for sale. Of course it's going to be a ridiculous price. And I've played that game at an older person, or you're picking at a guy's house and he tells you a price. It's like, ooh, you're like, you know what? I really need it. I want it.
Yeah.
Shit, I'll pay the retail or double retail because I have to have it, and that's what it is. So you have to realize that if you don't have patience, you're going to bend over and pay the price.
Hard sometimes.
And that's just how it goes. I've done it. I bought 3 window doors for more than I could buy a Model A Roadster body for. Basically, what I could buy a Model A Roadster body for.
A decent one, too.
Or I could buy a complete Model A Coupe.
Yeah.
Like, we sold a Model A Coupe for a little less than what I bought those doors for.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, now that I think about that.
Yeah, so, but I had to have them.
Yep.
And I didn't want to wait any longer, and that was what happened. So, patience is key if you're in this game. The last one is kind of a two-parter, but willingness to learn, and you also have to be willingness to learn about skills to do this stuff, but also willingness to learn about history.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes into restoration or doing nostalgic high-runs and customs, you have to be able to learn about whatever it is that you're doing. So
kind of like the museum. If you didn't catch our Week in Life video we did this past week, we had a restoration company. They don't really do vehicles that often. They mainly do like off the wall stuff, paintings and tanks and all kinds of stuff. But they're doing a 32 for the Smithsonian. Mm-hmm. They saw our car and they wanted to come to learn how the interior was done originally and look at some things that their car was missing, but they are willing to learn to figure out how it was done correctly.
Yeah, and even like the owner, he was a good example of that. So the owner of the business, he was asking us a bunch of questions about 32s and this and that. And I said, well, actually, there's this really good, I think they're right there in that
spiral bound.
Spiral bound. There's a really good 2-book series on restoring 32 Fords. And it has everything. You can go to the 9th degree of nerdiness with this about the month and you could tell. I mean, they have in there the name of the guy that did the interior, and he farted on every second seat. And if you're restoring a car that Ted put the interior in, you better fart on that seat if you want to get 1,000 points.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, I told him that book, and he's like, oh, well, I'm like, I think it might be a little on the expensive side. I don't remember, but he's like, oh, I'll buy those books because just to have that info and learn about the cars.
That is one thing I will say that's very good about antique cars is there's been enough people that gave a shit about antique cars. There's probably a book or some sort of resource out there that you can find the information on how it was supposed to be
And educate yourself.
yeah exactly. Or a group that you may not be able to do online, but you have mail a letter into or go to a meeting and just talk to there's enough people that have cared. The information's out there. It may be a little bit difficult to learn it because it's not just a piece of paper you can hold in your hand.
Well, and you also have to, and this is for younger people. I mean, I would consider us younger people as well, but you have to be willing to physically read a book.
Yeah,
get
definitely.
a tangible document, an old magazine, a book. Just like we were talking about this gentleman in a restoration company, it's like that book isn't. You can't go buy it on Amazon. I should say that, maybe it is, but
you can buy that on Amazon.
No, but digitally.
Oh no, not digitally. A physical item. Yeah,
that's what I mean. Like a lot of these books, there isn't a digital version you can buy, and you can go on your fucking Nook at night and read it.
Exactly.
In bed with your, whatever. Like you have to go buy the book and have the tangible pages. But like there is so much, and like the AACA library has a huge library of those types of things, whether they're original books on restoring or they're, books about different things, and you can go and read the book or, a library.
I'm such an old person. I like having that physical, like any of the parts, like the Green Bible. I'd much rather have that physical book in my hand to look through and like check everything out than be on my phone trying to read it.
Yeah. And also like with the books, generally, for the most part, those authors are vetted. And the information is pretty much correct.
Unlike those idiots with YouTube channels.
A lot of the social media stuff is, and that's why we dance around that. Like a lot of stuff we do is just, a lot of the stuff that we do is more like, this is what we found. This isn't gospel. This is what I know. There's a lot more information out there. As soon as you start claiming to be the expert,
you'll never hear us say that we are the subject matter experts.
Anything.
No.
Nothing at all. Maybe pizza. I'm pretty good on pizza.
Local. We'll say like local pizza.
Yeah.
Get out. You don't know pizza shops anywhere else, but the Boyertown area.
Well,
we know pizzas pretty well.
I'm mad that he has the one bite or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, Barstool.
Barstool, man. I am so jealous of that. I wish I would have thought of that because that's like my dream.
Yeah.
It's like my dream.
Oh, we always talked about, this is such a side tangent, but we always talk, you brought it up, I figure it's funny. We should, we talked about doing a series when we travel with call it the one chip challenge, and we go to local Mexican restaurants and rate their salsa that they bring out and give to you on the table. If you'd like us to do that, leave a comment and we'll start doing it at Mexican restaurants all over the country.
Maybe we'll start at least introducing it into our travel videos or our week in the life of stuff. Because like that's like our thing is everywhere we travel, we eat Mexican restaurants, and we're not talking about going to Chipotle or something like that. We try and find an authentic, or as authentic as we can find in America, Mexican spot, and we'll go, and we amongst us are always like, man, the salsa's, I don't know, it's not really that good. This one's a little tangy, and like, and the food in general, you're like, oh man, they had this crazy burrito, it was amazing. So like we've thought about doing like a Mexican food review as part of our traveling.
Yeah,
so
we should do that on this year. We'll start to try and do that in some of our trips.
Yeah, we'll just film a little clip on it.
We have eaten at an insane amount of Mexican restaurants all over the country, and
it's funny because we often will try, and we still can't remember that one. Or what did we
figured out? It was outside of Milwaukee.
Ah, that's right. One of our favorite ones. The one day we were like reminiscing about good Mexican spots. We're like, remember that spot? And we're like both talking about like, where was that?
We were driving back from somewhere. It was like an hour-and-a-half conversation of us trying to go through all the different Mexican places we've eaten at.
Oh God, yeah. And then we like reminisce about the certain like. Matt from Seattle Speed Shop, that place we went to by his house.
Burrito.
The queso burrito. He still to this day will be like eating there, and he'll text me a photo of the burrito. I'm like, I hate you.
I could go for one
Oh
of
God,
those
I
right
missed
now.
that burrito.
Yeah, that was a good burrito.
So yeah, well, that's our side tangent. We might start introducing some foodie reviews into our travel picking videos because yeah, they'll be great.
Okay, where were we before that?
Willingness to learn and history buff. So yeah, so we've talked about it like with the early hot rods and stuff. And I've started to notice actually people are listening and doing that because we've actually sold a lot of magazines to guys that were like, oh man, I saw in the videos you talk about these old magazines, and like we'll have extras left over that we, are duplicates that we don't need, and guys are buying them. And so buying, like with the old hot rods at Customs, buying the old magazines is the number one best way. If you want to figure out how to build a car in a nostalgic fashion, or you want to learn about what you like or what what you want to build, get a stack of old magazines. They're so cheap at at swap meets, and I mean even when we're selling them, when we're like a retail seller, what do we sell?
Oh, we sell them for. Most people try and charge like $5 a magazine, but I try and average around $3, just because there's so many copies out there that we're not selling anything rare. They're highly publicized magazines from back in the day.
And you figure like for $3 to get a magazine
that
has all this great information in it and stuff that you can read. And the best part, unlike if you go and buy a modern magazine, there's not many left, but if you go, when they were still in business, like Street Rod or something, off the newsstand, you couldn't read that magazine for a week and then you're done with it and then go and sell it for the same money you bought it for.
Exactly.
So like you could buy magazines a stack from us at the swap meet, flea market, for $3 a piece or whatever it is, $25 for a stack. You can read them and then go to the fall Carlisle and you sell them.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're going to get the same money back for them. So it's like, it's really good. But reading the history of this stuff is going to help you learn.
Yeah.
Whether it's restoring cars and you're learning the history of, the different types of, trim levels, and you understand why they did it, or what part of the country got these options because of it's a mountainous area and that's why they got this gear ratio or whatever. Like all that stuff is going to help you. So, but the willingness to learn goes back to the stuff we talked about earlier. Like you have to be willing to learn new trades or skills.
Yeah.
So for me, in the past handful of years, it's been a little while now, but like I wanted to learn how to do machining. I'm still learning. I'm so busy now. I don't have the time to practice like I'd like, but like I wanted to learn how to machine. So like it started out with the one R&D guy at Eastwood. He showed me on their little Smithy combination machine.
Yeah.
The basics while he stood over me and watched me, and then got to the point where he would let me use the lathe every now and then a little bit myself. And then fast forward to like a couple years later, he basically was like, hey, we're getting a new Smithy. Would you like to buy this one? Right from Eastwood. I knew that was the one I learned on, so I was comfortable on it. I got it. And then I had that machine for quite a while we had it here at this building. And then basically I started to grow out of it, and I learned, hey, I had, slop in it that I didn't like. I was running into, I needed a bigger machine, and I made the decision to, buy bigger machines, and now I'm learning even more. So it's like, I think that willingness to learn has to be there. You can't be just like complacent where you're like, okay, this is the, I have a flux core MIG welder and that's it. You have to be able to learn and willing to learn and get better. And that's where it just, you have to be able to see know that skill is going to help you in the future, and it's worth the time to learn. So again, back to the upholstery, I don't see that the time I would spend to learn and be proficient, I don't think I will use it enough for the time it takes.
Yeah.
Whereas machining, now that I've gotten better at the mill and the lathe, there's so much stuff now that like, it's nicer. I can whip up a solution a lot quicker. And that was the same with TIG welding and a lot of other stuff. And
I used to argue with people at the factory. Like we had mechanics and electricians, and the electricians would always be like, I'm not doing any mechanical work or helping them or learning. It's like, well, if you help them and learn, you can better troubleshoot what you need to do. So like we'd come across mechanical problems. It may not have been electrical, but I knew what the problem was because I helped someone and learned and furthered my skill set. So I didn't have to work as hard because we didn't have to figure it out. We already knew what the problem was. We just, learned how to do another skill to make everyone's life easier.
Yeah. So I think that's a big part of, that's another reason, like, if you're interested in getting into this hobby more seriously and building cars, you're not going to build one car. We talk about that a lot. If that's what you want to do is build one car and get it out of your system and you're done, then you probably don't want to invest in the skills and the tools and all that stuff. But like for me, there's always the next skill. What's the next thing? So machining is like a huge one. I feel like you never fully master it, until you're basically very old. It takes a lifetime. Metal shaping is the same way, doing all that stuff. And a lot of that stuff goes hand in hand. So like metal shaping, once you get into a higher level of metal shaping, you need to be able to machine because you got to make tooling for the machines that do the metal shaping of the tools. So,
and understanding how the metal works, which also comes into machining on how the metal works, and it all kind of works together.
Yeah, so that's, that and that's the willingness to learn on the boring side. Like we talk about it, we joke about it amongst ourselves, but like there's some YouTubers and there's also some people that comment on our stuff about how metal reacts, and we joke about it. It's like, oh, you pour water on it or you shock it with air and blah, 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 and then the metal's not going to warp, and you're like, no, read a science.
Yeah, metal's going to warp when it wants to warp.
Yes,
no matter
it's
what
science.
Yeah.
You introduce heat, it causes a reaction, and the metal is going to shrink, and that's what causes warping. So like there's stuff like that. Like, so for me, that was a huge breakthrough with me when I first started doing metal shaping and welding and fabrication. Once I get beyond the like just piecing stuff together, was learning the science. I took some classes with Ron Cavell and some higher end people, and the beginning of the class is talking about metallurgy and science, and I'm like, whoa, this is actually, so now like things come a lot easier because you understand what the metal is doing on the scientific, the molecular level.
You can't get to the fun stuff without getting through the boring stuff that makes the fun stuff make sense.
You can get to it, but you're not going to get the finish or the results that you want.
Yeah.
And that goes as far as tuning an engine.
TIG welding.
Anything. Well, like, but I mean like every facet of doing the cars, like the best metal or best engine builders, engine tuners, the guys that are going the fastest at Berlinville and all these places. And we joke about it with like Ron is, when I met Ron and got to know him, like him talking about, he's like over our head with, I don't have
technical data. Yeah.
Yes. For engine stuff.
Yeah.
So we've met other guys that are like that are very heavy on machining engines, and you talking to them, like, whoa, man, that's beyond me. I don't know if I even want to learn that currently. And you understand how the engine works down to every little facet of the scientific data to make an engine run at its best capabilities. You're gonna you know how to turn the screws in the carburetor right. Like we can make an engine run, it runs decent, it could start every time, it goes pretty good.
Yeah. But
the guy that really knows all that stuff,
he's trying to get the most.
He's going to go way faster than us. And I always say that. I'm like, I just want to have fun. I want my cars to be fun. Sure, they probably could be faster or run better, but that's not. Now, if I want to build a car that's going to perform to that level, like an Arden, I'm going to bring it to the guy that does that has a lifetime of experience. I'm going to take the rear to the guy that's going to build it, and it's going to have the best, put together the best. So understanding the science and the, getting that part, that's where you make that cutoff. And for me, I like the fabrication and metalworking side of it. So I took the time to learn the science, and I'm still always learning all the time. So it's pretty interesting. So there's some good YouTube channels that I've watched some stuff even just recently that was like, I don't remember the guy's name, but he's a aircraft metal shaping, coach builder, whatever. And he was doing some videos on like some dies that he sells for planishing hammer and power hammer. And he's talking about like he uses plastic on like all kinds of plastic dies. And I'm like, that's weird. I never, I've seen it, but I didn't understand. And he's like talking about the scientific level that plastic is softer than metal. So it doesn't actually, you could smooth things without stretching them because plastic is softer.
Yeah.
So you're like smoothing it. So you're using it with a planishing hammer and it's just smoothing. It's not stretching. And that was something that like a light bulb went off because when I was doing the roof on the Mercury, this just happened recently. On the Mercury, I was having some problem with I was planishing out my welds and then it was overstretching the panel and then I had to shrink it back down and I was like struggling with some spots with that. And I'm like, man, how do you get it smooth without stretching it? And so he was like, oh, I use these plastic dies if I'm just going to smooth. I'm like, the plastic is softer than the, holy shit. I was like,
yep.
And I'm all nerdy watching these videos of the guy.
Did you buy a set of plastic dies?
I'm going to. Yeah. Yeah, he sells the dies, and you could also make them. But like, I'll probably buy a set of them because it has its place. It's very helpful, and now that I understand, I don't mind spending the money to buy them. Where at first I probably was like, man, that's a fair amount of money for. Aren't they going to wear out?
And
then you watch the video
for the tool.
Yeah, and then you understand the science behind it. I'm like, oh well, now it's a necessity. I have to have those.
Yeah.
And if it's $300 or whatever it costs, it's like, well, it's worth it because I'm going to get the finish that I'm looking for. So have to be able to learn. Never stop learning. That's a big part of this too. Definitely. It's probably equally as important as the problem solving talked about. So.
And the never stop learning thing, we use that in the parts business too, because even our business side of it, we're constantly learning. We're like, yeah, that'll never sell, and then we sell a couple things like, oh, holy shit, everything sells. Everything sells. This past year, it's our motto. When Matt and I discuss anything, we're like, should we take that? Should we sell it? Should we just send it to auction? It's everything sells.
Everything sells, yeah, and it's just a matter of making a decision if the work to sell it was worth it.
Yeah.
Or the like we learned, the taking it with, if we're halfway across the country buying a truck full of stuff, sometimes there's stuff we left behind where we had the space. We could have literally just thrown it in the truck. Yeah. It was no more work, and we were just like, I don't know. And then later you're like, oh shit, that was worth $50 or $100.
And we also started doing, when we know we're going somewhere, say like New Hampshire, where we went to that Model A stuff, Matt and I both sat down at night on our time off looking at eBay and other places and seeing what weird Model A stuff there was, because there's some of these cars, there's some weird parts. You're like, that ain't worth anything. And then you look on eBay and you're like, God, that's worth like $400 because it's some weird obscure part that they only made for 3 months of this year. And, that constant education helps us become more successful selling parts because we're just taking the time to learn of what's selling.
Yeah, and we talked about that in one of the other podcasts with like the reselling and how we run the business. So, like the reason that I've been so successful over the years with growing this to the point where we could make it a full-time gig is I was always learning the weird obscure stuff. So when I would go to auctions, I would buy the stuff, and it's like that willing. I never want to stop learning about that stuff.
That goes hand in hand with for storing a car, because you might need to learn what that expensive stuff is before you really dive head in.
Oh yeah.
So you could keep an eye on eBay or on swap meets, and that part's going to be very expensive. You better start looking for it now.
Right. And if you know it's rare and you stumble upon one at a swap meet, you're like, oh man, I heard I learned how rare that is. I'm looking at it. I better just buy it because
I don't know if my car needs it or not, but might as well it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
That's right. Wow, that's a good one. That's a good way to end the podcast. Yep. Mike had a great one-liner.
Yep.
So there you go.
Doesn't happen very often.
Get that on your T-shirt. There'll be bumper stickers with that and Mike's name after it. M Ham.
Yes.
So thank you guys for following along. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Like we mentioned before, these audio ones we're doing a little more like tips and different talking points. And I know I've had some people that have DM'd us or in person told us they enjoyed these, that maybe is motivational for them or just help them. So if you're just getting into this hobby and you listen to the podcast or thinking about building a project, we'd love to hear from you. If this was helpful, definitely send us a DM or an email or something. We'd love to hear feedback. And if you have an idea for a future topic, something you're curious about or you'd like to learn more about, we'd love to discuss it. So thank you guys for following along. We appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next one.
See you.